Hello everyone, I'm Yunus from ASP Dijital, and this is going to be a HighByte demo for how we would communicate a Kafka Apache data source to read industrial data and write those data into the internal UNS Client HighByte, which you can think of as a custom MQTT broker. And also, how are we going to get these industrial data and write them into a custom HTTP server endpoint? First, in HighByte, we need to create connections for that. Everything coming in and out of HighByte are called connections. In connections, if a connection is running, you would see the status good. For example, my custom HTTP server status is good because I have an output that specifies where to write the data. I can test this by typing in any data here and trying to write. I specified that the body type is JSON and we're using post method. For other things we're going to use in this demo, I have the internal MQTT, which is the UNS client. I configured it by going to settings and turning on the MQTT broker. I copied the endpoint URI and paste it into this connection. Also in this demo, we're going to read data from Kafka. For that, I have specified where it is hosted. Then, in the input, because we are reading data, so it is considered an input, I create an object here. This specifies the Kafka topic and the group. I can test the input, and I can say there is no new data. But this doesn't mean it is not working. There is just no new data. Then I move on to models. In the models, I create two models for this. The motor RPM and the line status is a model. You can think of it as a skeleton. I have a pressure and temperature sensor model. This is a skeleton that holds the parameters for temperature and pressure. I will use these in instances for specific plants and sensors. For example, in the pressure and temperature, I have two attributes. They are basic and accept any type of data. If they fail, they will return unable to retrieve, try again. In instances, I have made use of this model. For example, in Plant 1 Sensors instance, I used the model and put data into these attributes. I've referenced the data from my Kafka read connection and explicitly mentioned the pressure attribute. This makes sure that the pressure value is always kept in the pressure sensor attribute. In temperature sensor, a similar approach for the temperature. The path holds the JSON object that I want to read. In namespaces, I created a Plant 1 namespace to keep things organized. I kept my Plant 1 Sensors instance and the line status, both of them under Plant 1 in the namespace. Then I created a pipeline. The pipeline, I created two pipelines. The first one was logging the data into the internal UNS. This means I made use of the UI to drag and drop different elements. I create a poll trigger to keep making requests. And every time it is triggered, it will read data from Plant 1 Sensors instance. As you remember, the Plant 1 Sensors had live data from pressure and temperature sensors. Then for every success and failure, I decide to write the values into the internal MQTT endpoint. When I go to Tools and go to UNS Client, by default I will see my internal MQTT. When I click Connect, I will be receiving data. I received the output topic in the UNS Client, and it holds all the data I need. These data are coming from the pipeline. The pipeline is reading them from an instance, and the instance is making use of the model. And of course, the connections are feeding the live data. Also, if we need to look into where these data are coming from, we can simply go to my Kafka broker. This is the live data the Apache Kafka is generating. These are mock data and not real factory sensors, but they simulate real-world data. My Kafka is producing motor RPM, flow rates, and line status alongside others like temperature and pressure. In one of my instances, I made use of temperature, pressure. In the other instance, I made use of motor RPM and line status. If I didn't have HighByte, I would just consume all this raw data all the time without any rules and structure. But by utilizing HighByte, I made sure that I can categorize, split, and organize any data I have coming from anywhere in the factory. The other pipeline, where I'm logging to the HTTP server, is here. This makes sure, in a loop, reading the data and writing to the HTTP server. I have my HTTP server right here. It is receiving data live from the pipeline. This is the last data it received. It has a timestamp, the source, the endpoint in my HTTP server, and the data I received from HighByte. In my HTTP server, I can do anything with this data. This demo was about demonstrating a simple data flow, gathering data from an Apache Kafka data source, simulating a factory, and logging that data in the internal UNS client of HighByte, plus sending the data to a custom HTTP server. This custom HTTP server can be any HTTP server that allows post, get, delete, and similar HTTP REST methods.